The transport ship's cargo bay hummed with alien voices, speaking in a dozen different languages. Captain Marcus Chen stood among the other prisoners, his hands bound behind his back with energy restraints that glowed blue against his wrists. The metal floor beneath his feet vibrated with the ship's engines, carrying them toward a fate none of them had chosen. Around him, beings from across the galaxy shuffled nervously. There were tall, crystalline Zeltharians whose bodies caught and reflected the harsh overhead lights. Short, furry Keplites whispered prayers in their native tongue. A group of scaled Vorthak warriors maintained their proud posture despite their circumstances. All of them shared one thing in common: they were prisoners of the hegemony. Marcus had been a cargo pilot running supplies between human colonies when the hegemony intercepted his ship. That was 3 months ago. Since then, he had learned more about galactic politics than he ever wanted to know. The hegemony controlled most of the known galaxy, ruling through fear and overwhelming military might. They took prisoners from every species they encountered, using them for labor, entertainment, or worse. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the small portholes, Marcus could see a massive space station floating in the darkness. It looked like a twisted metal flower with hundreds of petals, each one large enough to dock capital ships. This was Nexus Prime, the hegemony's greatest stronghold and the seat of their power. A door at the far end of the cargo bay hissed open. Hegemony guards marched in, their black armor gleaming under the lights. They were humanoid, but taller than most species, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Each guard carried a neural disruptor that could paralyze any organic being with a single shot. "All prisoners will be processed," announced the lead guard in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "You will obey all commands without question. Resistance will be met with immediate termination." The prisoners were herded into lines based on their species. Marcus found himself grouped with 3 other humans: a merchant woman named Sarah, an engineer called Pavel, and a young man who claimed to be a student. They were the only humans on the transport, which made them stand out among the diverse crowd of aliens. As they were led through the station's corridors, Marcus studied his surroundings. The walls were covered in a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Holographic displays showed propaganda images of the hegemony's victories. Guards stood at every intersection, their weapons ready. Everything was designed to intimidate and control. The processing center was a vast hall filled with examination tables and scanning equipment. Prisoners were separated and subjected to various tests. Medical scans determined their physical capabilities. Psychological evaluations measured their mental strengths and weaknesses. Skill assessments identified their potential usefulness to the hegemony. Marcus was strapped to a scanning table while machines hummed around him. A hegemony technician operated the controls, occasionally making notes on a data pad. The scans revealed everything: his muscle density, reaction times, neural patterns, even his genetic markers. The human body was still relatively unknown to most galactic species, so the technician seemed particularly interested in the results. "Unusual bone structure," the technician muttered. "High pain tolerance. Excellent cardiovascular system. What is your planet's gravity?" "Earth standard," Marcus replied. "About 9.8 meters per second squared." The technician's eyes widened slightly. "Your species evolved under higher gravity than most. That explains the muscle development." He made more notes. "You will be assigned to heavy labor detail." After the medical examination came the psychological evaluation. A hegemony interrogator, this one with 6 eyes arranged in a circle around her head, asked Marcus a series of questions while monitoring his brain activity. "What is your greatest fear?" she asked. "Being unable to protect those I care about," Marcus answered truthfully. "What motivates you?" "Duty, honor, keeping my word." The interrogator paused at that last answer. "Elaborate." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "When I give my word, I keep it. No matter the cost." She made a note. Primitive loyalty concepts, potentially useful for motivation. She looked up at him again. "What would make you break your principles?" "Nothing," Marcus said without hesitation. The interrogator's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "We shall see." The skill assessment was conducted by a massive being that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros. He tested Marcus's technical knowledge, problem-solving abilities, and physical coordination. The human's scores were higher than expected in several categories. "You can operate spacecraft?" the assessor rumbled. "Yes, I'm a licensed pilot for multiple ship classes." "Combat experience?" Marcus hesitated. He had served in the Colonial Defense Force before becoming a cargo pilot, but admitting to military training might make his situation worse. "Some," he said carefully. The assessor made a note. "We may have special assignments for you." After processing, the prisoners were assigned to quarters. Marcus was placed in a cell block with other high-value prisoners, beings with skills the hegemony wanted to exploit. His cell was small but clean, with a narrow bunk, a sanitation unit, and a small food dispenser. The walls were transparent aluminum, allowing the guards to observe everything. On his second day, Marcus was taken to a work assignment briefing. The room was filled with prisoners from various species, all wearing gray uniforms with identification numbers. At the front of the room stood a hegemony overseer, a tall, imposing figure with silver skin and cybernetic implants covering half of her face. "I am Overseer Vex," she announced. "You are here because you possess skills useful to the hegemony. You will work diligently, follow all orders, and maintain productivity quotas. Those who excel may earn privileges. Those who fail will face consequences." She activated a holographic display showing various work assignments: mining operations on airless worlds, construction projects in hostile environments, technical maintenance on warships, all dangerous work that the hegemony preferred not to assign to their own people. "Transport Pilot Chen," Overseer Vex called out. Marcus stood. "Yes, ma'am." Vex's cybernetic eye focused on him. "You will be assigned to our shipyard maintenance team. Your knowledge of multiple ship designs will be valuable." She paused. "Do not attempt to sabotage any equipment. We have ways of detecting such activities, and the penalties are severe." "Understood," Marcus replied. The shipyards were massive structures attached to Nexus Prime, like metallic parasites. Inside, dozens of hegemony vessels were under construction or repair. The scale was overwhelming. Battleships larger than human cities, carriers that could hold entire fleets of fighters, and massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. Marcus was assigned to a team responsible for maintaining the navigation systems on a heavy cruiser. The other team members included Pavel, the human engineer from his transport, and several aliens with technical backgrounds. Their supervisor was a 4-armed hegemony technician named Korax, who seemed more interested in meeting quotas than in the quality of work. As they worked, Marcus studied the ship's systems carefully. The hegemony used quantum-locked navigation computers that were supposedly impossible to hack or alter. But Marcus had learned a few things during his military service that weren't in any official manual. He began to form a plan. During their rest periods, Marcus quietly spoke with other prisoners. He learned that Nexus Prime held over 50,000 beings from hundreds of different species. Most had given up hope of ever seeing their homes again. But a few, like Marcus, still believed in the possibility of freedom. "The hegemony has ruled for 3,000 years, explained Thyra, a Zeltharian engineer. "Their technology is superior to most species. Their military is unstoppable. Even if we could escape this station, where would we go? They control every major trade route and military checkpoint." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I've never met an unstoppable force yet. Everything has weaknesses. Everything can be defeated if you know where to hit it. Thyra's crystalline face reflected doubt. Your species is new to the galaxy. You don't understand the power of the hegemony. My species might be new, Marcus replied, but we've had plenty of practice dealing with bullies. And there's one thing bullies never expect: someone willing to fight back when they think they've already won. Over the following weeks, Marcus carefully observed the station's routines. Guard shifts changed every 8 hours. Supply deliveries followed predictable schedules. Most importantly, the hegemony's arrogance made them sloppy. They believed their prisoners were too cowed to resist, too diverse to cooperate, and too technically inferior to pose a real threat. They were wrong on all 3 counts. Marcus began to build a network among the prisoners. He identified key individuals with useful skills: engineers who understood the station's systems, pilots who knew hyperspace routes, fighters who could handle weapons, and leaders who could organize others. He was careful to avoid the informants that every prison system attracted, those who traded information for better treatment. The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered something interesting about the navigation systems he was maintaining. The quantum locks weren't as secure as the hegemony believed. There was a back door built into the system, probably left by the original programmers as a debugging tool. With the right access codes, it would be possible to alter a ship's navigation data without triggering security alerts. Marcus shared this information with a select group of trusted prisoners during a carefully orchestrated meeting in one of the shipyard's maintenance tunnels. The group included Thera, Pavel, Sarah, the human merchant, and a former Vorthak military commander named Grak. "This changes everything," Grak said, his scaled face showing excitement for the first time since Marcus had met him. "If we can control where their ships go, we can send them anywhere we want," Pavel finished. "But how do we get access to the codes?" Marcus had been thinking about that problem for days. "The codes are stored in the central navigation database. It's heavily guarded, but there might be a way. I need to study the duty rosters more carefully." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Overseer Vex announced that several prisoners would be selected for a special assignment: upgrading the navigation systems on the station's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Domination. The work would take place over several days, giving the selected team unprecedented access to critical systems. Marcus volunteered immediately. So did several others in his network. To their surprise, they were all selected. It seemed their technical skills had impressed their captors enough to overcome normal security concerns. As they prepared for the assignment, Marcus felt a familiar sensation: the calm focus that came before a critical mission. He had felt it during his military service, before dangerous cargo runs, and now before what might be the most important undertaking of his life. The other prisoners looked to him with a mixture of hope and desperation. So many species, so many worlds, all represented in this group of beings who had lost everything to the hegemony's expansion. But maybe, just maybe, they could strike back in a way their captors would never see coming. The Domination loomed ahead of them as they were escorted through the shipyard. It was a kilometer long and bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Its dark hull seemed to absorb light like a black hole. This was the pride of the hegemony fleet, the ship that had conquered dozens of worlds. Soon, if Marcus's plan worked, it would become the instrument of their freedom. The Domination's bridge was a cathedral of technology and intimidation. Holographic displays floated in perfect formations around the command center, showing tactical data from across the galaxy. The captain's chair sat on a raised platform like a throne, surrounded by workstations operated by blue-skinned hegemony officers. Everything was designed to reinforce the hierarchy that kept their empire functioning. Marcus and his team were escorted into the navigation section by 2 heavily armed guards. Overseer Vex accompanied them, her cybernetic eye scanning every movement they made. The navigation computers were housed in a secure chamber with walls of transparent steel, allowing full observation while they worked. "You have 3 days to complete the upgrades," Vex announced. "These navigation systems will be used in our next major expansion campaign. Failure is not acceptable." Her artificial eye focused on Marcus. "You will lead this team, Chen. I want detailed reports every 6 hours." Marcus nodded. "Understood. We'll need full access to the quantum processors and the hyperspace calculation arrays." "Granted, under supervision." Vex gestured to the guards. "These officers will monitor your every action. Do not test their vigilance." As the team began work, Marcus assessed the situation carefully. The navigation chamber had 4 workstations, each connected to different aspects of the ship's guidance systems. Pavel worked on the hyperspace drive interfaces. Thyra handled the quantum processors. Sarah managed the sensor integration systems. Marcus himself focused on the central command protocols. The guards stood at the chamber entrance, watching through the transparent walls. They couldn't see the details of what the prisoners were doing, but they could observe any suspicious movements. Marcus needed to be extremely careful about how he accessed the back door he had discovered. On the first day, the team worked legitimately on the assigned upgrades. Marcus studied the system architecture more thoroughly than he had been able to before. The Domination's navigation computers were the most advanced he had ever seen, with processing power that could calculate hyperspace jumps across thousands of light years in seconds. But more importantly, he confirmed that the back door existed in this system too. The original programmers had built in a maintenance access that bypassed normal security protocols. It was hidden deep in the code, disguised as a routine diagnostic function. The hegemony administrators had never noticed it because they relied on the quantum locks to prevent unauthorized access. During their rest period, Marcus quietly briefed the others on what he had found. They were quartered in temporary holding cells near the bridge, close enough to the navigation chamber to return quickly if needed. "The back door is there," he whispered to Pavel during their meal break. "But I need a distraction to access it without the guards noticing." Pavel nodded. "What kind of distraction?" "Something that will draw their attention away from the navigation chamber for at least 10 minutes. Long enough for me to input the access codes and modify the targeting protocols." "I might have an idea," Sarah said quietly. She was seated at the next table, but close enough to hear. "What if one of us had an accident? Nothing serious, but enough to require medical attention." Marcus considered this. It would need to look completely natural, and the person would have to be convincing about being injured. "I can handle that," Thyra said. Her crystalline physiology made her more fragile than most species, but also more likely to suffer believable accidents. "If I fell and cracked one of my crystal formations, it would bleed and look serious, even if it wasn't life-threatening." The plan was risky, but it was their best option. They agreed to execute it on the second day when they would have legitimate reasons to be moving around the navigation chamber. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Admiral Keth, the commander of the Hegemony's Third Fleet, arrived on the bridge to observe their work. She was an imposing figure even by Hegemony standards, with silver skin that seemed to glow under the bridge lights and cybernetic enhancements that replaced most of her left arm. "These are the prisoners working on our navigation systems?" Keth asked Overseer Vex. "Yes, Admiral. Their technical skills are quite advanced despite their primitive origins." Keth walked to the navigation chamber and studied the prisoners through the transparent walls. Her gaze lingered on Marcus. "The human is their leader?" "Yes. Former transport pilot, but his understanding of ship systems is remarkable." "Humans," Keth mused. "We've heard reports about their recent entry into galactic space. Supposedly they have some unusual characteristics." She activated the chamber's communication system. "Human, what is your assessment of our navigation technology?" Marcus looked up from his workstation. He had been expecting this kind of test. "It's impressive, Admiral. The quantum processing power exceeds anything I've seen before. The hyperspace calculations are elegant and efficient. And compared to human technology? Marcus paused as if considering. Honestly, we're probably 50 years behind you in navigation systems, maybe more. Keth seemed satisfied with this answer. Continue your work. I want these upgrades completed ahead of schedule. After the Admiral left, Marcus felt sweat on his palms despite the controlled atmosphere. He had told the truth about human technology being behind the hegemonies, but he had deliberately avoided mentioning that humans had other advantages. Creativity, for instance, and the willingness to take desperate chances when cornered. That afternoon, they executed their plan. Thera was working on a quantum processor when she deliberately caught her arm against a sharp edge of the housing. She cried out and stumbled backward, her crystalline skin cracking and bleeding luminescent fluid. The guards reacted immediately, calling for medical assistance and rushing into the chamber to assess the situation. Overseer Vex arrived within minutes, furious at what appeared to be careless handling of critical equipment. While everyone's attention was focused on Thyra's injury, Marcus quickly accessed the back door he had discovered. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, inputting code sequences he had memorized from studying the system architecture. The quantum locks never activated because the system interpreted his actions as routine maintenance. In less than 8 minutes, Marcus had accomplished what should have been impossible. He had inserted a hidden subroutine into the navigation protocols that would activate during the ship's next hyperspace jump. The subroutine would alter the targeting coordinates by a precise amount, sending the domination to a location of Marcus's choosing instead of its intended destination. Thyra was taken to the medical bay for treatment, leaving the rest of the team to continue working under increased scrutiny. But the damage was done, or rather, the trap was set. Over the next day and a half, Marcus and his team completed the legitimate upgrades, while carefully concealing any evidence of their sabotage. The hidden subroutine was buried so deep in the system code that it would be virtually undetectable during normal operations. On their final day aboard the Domination, Admiral Keth returned to inspect their work personally. She ran diagnostic tests on each system they had modified, looking for any signs of tampering or substandard work. Everything appeared normal. "Excellent work," she told Overseer Vex. "These upgrades will serve us well in the Proxima campaign." Marcus's blood went cold. The Proxima campaign could only mean one thing. The hegemony was planning to attack the Proxima Centauri system, humanity's first interstellar colony. Thousands of human civilians lived there, completely unaware of the threat approaching them. That night, back in their holding cells, Marcus shared this intelligence with his team. The mood became even more urgent. They weren't just fighting for their own freedom anymore. They were potentially the only warning their species would receive. "When will they launch the attack?" Pavel asked. "Soon, based on what I overheard," Marcus replied. "The Admiral mentioned finalizing preparations within the week." "And your sabotage will stop them?" Marcus had been thinking about this constantly since overhearing the conversation. "The subroutine will redirect their hyperspace jump, but I'm not sure exactly where they'll end up. I programmed it to aim for empty space in the Vega system, but hyperspace calculations are complex. There could be variables I didn't account for." "What's the worst-case scenario?" Sarah asked. "Worst case? They figure out what happened and track the sabotage back to us. Best case? The Domination ends up stranded in empty space, giving us time to warn Proxima and escape." The next morning brought another surprise. Instead of being returned to their normal work assignments, Marcus and his team were brought before Admiral Keth in her private quarters aboard the Domination. The room was decorated with trophies from conquered worlds, artwork, weapons, and other artifacts representing dozens of fallen civilizations. "I have been reviewing your personnel files," Keth began, standing behind a desk made from polished stone that might have come from any number of worlds. Your technical skills are exceptional. Too exceptional for simple prisoner labor. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but kept his expression neutral. We do our best to be useful, Admiral. Indeed. Which is why I am making you a proposition. Keth activated a holographic display showing a star chart. The hegemony is planning several major expansion campaigns over the next year. We could use skilled technicians who understand various ship designs and navigation systems. She touched a control, and the display zoomed in on several star systems. Marcus recognized some of them: human colonies, trade routes, defensive positions. Work for us willingly, Keth continued, and you will be treated as technical specialists rather than prisoners. Better quarters, better food, access to entertainment systems. You would even receive payment for your services. And if we refuse? Marcus asked. Keth's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Then you return to standard prisoner status. Hard labor, minimal rations, no privileges. A short and unpleasant existence. Marcus looked at his teammates. Pavel appeared tempted by the offer. Sarah looked conflicted. Thyra's crystalline face was unreadable. This was the moment Marcus had been preparing for, though not in the way he had expected. I need time to consider this offer, Marcus said carefully. You have until we reach Proxima, Keth replied. Once the campaign begins, the offer will be withdrawn. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Marcus's mind raced. The Admiral's offer confirmed his worst fears. The attack on Proxima was imminent, and the hegemony expected human technical expertise to help them succeed. But it also presented an opportunity he hadn't anticipated. If he accepted the offer and gained Keth's trust, he might be able to sabotage more than just one ship. He could potentially gather intelligence about other hegemony operations, identify weaknesses in their military structure, maybe even find a way to contact human defensive forces. But accepting would mean collaborating with the enemy, even if only temporarily. It would mean helping them attack his own species while he worked toward a larger goal. The moral weight of that choice felt crushing. That night, Marcus lay on his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling. In a few days, the Domination would jump to hyperspace, heading toward what its crew believed was the Proxima system. Instead, if his sabotage worked, they would find themselves stranded in empty space near Vega. But even if his plan succeeded, it would only delay the inevitable. The hegemony had dozens of ships, thousands of worlds, and overwhelming technological superiority. One act of sabotage wouldn't stop their expansion into human space, unless it was the beginning of something larger. Marcus sat up on his bunk and looked around the small cell. For the first time since his capture, he allowed himself to think beyond immediate survival. The hegemony controlled most of the galaxy through fear and superior technology. But they had never faced a species like humanity before, a species that had learned to fight against impossible odds and win through determination, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. Maybe it was time to teach them what humans were really capable of when pushed to the wall. The moment came 3 days later during the morning shift change. Admiral Keth had called Marcus to her quarters for his final answer about joining the hegemony's technical corps. As he walked through the corridors of the Domination, Marcus felt the familiar vibration that indicated the ship was preparing for hyperspace. Perfect timing. In Keth's quarters, the Admiral stood before her trophy wall, admiring a ceremonial sword that had belonged to some long-dead alien warrior. She didn't turn around when Marcus entered. Have you made your decision, human? Marcus took a deep breath. Everything depended on the next few minutes. I accept your offer, Admiral. My team and I will work for the hegemony. Now Keth did turn, and Marcus saw satisfaction in her cold eyes. An intelligent choice. You will find that cooperation brings many rewards. She activated a communication panel. Bridge, this is Admiral Keth. The human prisoners are to be reclassified as technical specialists. Transfer them to appropriate quarters immediately. Yes, Admiral, came the reply. We are beginning our jump to Proxima in 15 minutes. Excellent. Keth looked at Marcus. Your first assignment will be analyzing human defensive capabilities during our attack. Your knowledge of their military systems will be invaluable. Marcus nodded, fighting to keep his expression neutral. In 15 minutes, his hidden subroutine would activate, and instead of jumping to Proxima, the Domination would find itself in empty space near Vega. But he couldn't reveal his satisfaction yet. I understand, Admiral. I'll do whatever I can to help. I'm sure you will. Keth moved to her desk and began reviewing tactical displays. You may go. Report to Deck 7 for your new quarters assignment. Marcus left the Admiral's quarters and made his way through the ship's corridors. Around him, the crew prepared for what they believed would be another easy conquest. Hegemony officers checked weapon systems and coordinated with fleet elements. Soldiers reviewed attack protocols and planetary assault procedures. None of them suspected that their target had just changed completely. In the ship's central lift, Marcus checked the time display. 10 minutes until the jump. He thought about the thousands of human civilians on Proxima who had no idea how close they had come to disaster. If his plan worked, they would have weeks, or maybe months, to prepare defenses before the hegemony discovered their mistake. But Marcus was thinking beyond Proxima now. During his time aboard the Domination, he had learned valuable intelligence about hegemony operations. Their fleet movements, communication protocols, even some of their military weaknesses. If he could find a way to get this information to human space, it might make the difference in the coming war. The countdown reached 5 minutes. Marcus reached his new quarters and was surprised to find his team already waiting for him. Their quarters were significantly better than their previous cells. Actual beds instead of bunks, personal storage space, even a small entertainment system. Did you really agree to work for them? Pavel asked as soon as the door closed. Yes and no, Marcus replied quietly. He activated the room's white noise generator, a device designed to prevent eavesdropping. I told them what they wanted to hear, but our real mission hasn't changed. 3 minutes to hyperspace jump, announced the ship's communication system. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. In just moments, they would know if 3 months of planning and preparation had been worth it. Either his sabotage would work and give humanity a chance, or they would all end up as collaborators in the conquest of their own species. Jump commencing in 60 seconds, came another announcement. The team gathered around the small porthole in their quarters. Outside, stars wheeled slowly as the ship oriented itself for the hyperspace transition. Marcus had seen hundreds of these jumps during his career as a transport pilot, but none had ever carried such significance. Hyperspace jump in 10 seconds, the communication system announced. All personnel secure for transition. Marcus counted down silently. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The universe twisted. Reality bent around them as the ship entered the strange non-space of hyperspace. For a moment, that lasted both forever and no time at all. Nothing existed except the Domination and the swirling energies that surrounded it. Then they dropped back into normal space. Through the porthole, Marcus saw stars, but not the ones that should have been visible near Proxima. These were the constellations of the Vega system, exactly where his subroutine had directed them. Empty space, with no planets, no colonies, no strategic value whatsoever. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Navigation error, came an urgent announcement. All senior officers report to the bridge immediately. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. His sabotage had worked perfectly. The Domination was stranded in empty space, 47 light-years from its intended target. It would take them weeks to recalculate a new jump, assuming they could figure out what had gone wrong with their navigation systems. But his celebration was short-lived. Within an hour, security teams were sweeping the ship, looking for signs of sabotage. The hegemony might be arrogant, but they weren't stupid. A navigation error this precise was too convenient to be accidental. Marcus and his team were among the first to be questioned, but their status as new technical specialists provided some protection. Admiral Keth herself conducted the interrogation, her cybernetic enhancements scanning for signs of deception. "The navigation error occurred in systems you recently worked on," she stated bluntly. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied. "We were upgrading the quantum processors and hyperspace calculation arrays. If there was a problem with our work, I take full responsibility." Keth studied him carefully. "Our preliminary investigation suggests this was not an accident. The targeting coordinates were altered by someone with intimate knowledge of our navigation protocols." Marcus maintained his composure despite the growing danger. "Admiral, with respect, I'm a transport pilot, not a military programmer. I don't have the knowledge to hack hegemony navigation systems even if I wanted to." "Perhaps not alone," Keth conceded, "but with help from your teammates." "Admiral," Sarah interjected, "we were under constant observation while we worked. The guards would have seen any attempt at sabotage." This was true, and it seemed to give Keth pause. The hidden backdoor Marcus had used was so deeply buried in the system architecture that detecting it would require a complete analysis of millions of lines of code. "You will remain under enhanced surveillance while we investigate," Keth finally decided. "If evidence of your involvement is discovered, the consequences will be severe." As they were escorted back to their quarters under heavy guard, Marcus knew they had bought time, but not safety. Eventually, the hegemony's technicians would find his hidden subroutine. When that happened, he and his team would face execution or worse. But for now, the immediate threat to Proxima had been neutralized, and Marcus had gained access to the inner workings of the hegemony's most powerful warship. It was time to put the second phase of his plan into action. Over the next several days, while the domination drifted in empty space and engineering teams worked frantically to identify the navigation problem, Marcus carefully observed the ship's operations. His new status as a technical specialist gave him access to areas previously off-limits. He studied security protocols, communication systems, and weapon configurations. Most importantly, he identified the ship's critical vulnerabilities. The hegemony's technology was impressive, but it had been designed with arrogance. They had never expected to face serious resistance, so their defensive measures were focused on external threats rather than internal sabotage. The ship's central computer core was heavily protected but not impossible to access. The main power distribution system had redundancies, but also bottlenecks that could be exploited. Even the artificial gravity generators had weaknesses that could be turned against the crew. Marcus shared this intelligence with his team during their carefully controlled conversations. They developed a plan that was both ambitious and desperate. They would attempt to take control of the domination itself. The opportunity came when Admiral Keth summoned Marcus to participate in a high-level strategic conference. Hegemony commanders were reviewing their invasion plans for human space now that the Proxima operation had been delayed. Marcus was ordered to provide intelligence about human defensive capabilities. Sitting in the conference room surrounded by alien military officers, Marcus felt the weight of history. These beings were planning the conquest of his species, discussing human colonies as if they were resources to be harvested. The casual way they talked about destroying entire civilizations made his blood burn with anger. "Human military technology is inferior to ours in most respects," Marcus told them, staying as close to the truth as possible. "Their ships are smaller and less advanced. Their weapons are primitive, but they have some tactical advantages." "Such as?" asked Admiral Keth. "Humans are unpredictable in combat. They don't follow standard tactical doctrines, and they have a tendency to fight harder when they're losing. Marcus paused for effect. They also have no central government, so conquering them might be more difficult than attacking a unified empire. This intelligence would actually help humanity by encouraging the hegemony to underestimate human determination, but it satisfied the alien commanders. They began discussing how to exploit humanity's supposed weaknesses. While they talked, Marcus memorized every detail he could about their invasion plans. Fleet movements, target priorities, timeline estimates, all information that could save human lives if he could somehow get it to the right people. The conference lasted for hours, but eventually Marcus was dismissed back to his quarters. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed something interesting. The security sweeps looking for evidence of sabotage had created gaps in normal patrol patterns. Guards were concentrated in technical areas, leaving other sections less monitored. That night, Marcus made his move. Using knowledge gained from his observations, he slipped out of his quarters during a shift change. The corridors were dimly lit during night cycle, and the reduced guard presence gave him opportunities to move unseen. His destination was the ship's communication array. The Domination carried the most advanced communication equipment in the hegemony fleet, capable of sending messages across vast interstellar distances. If Marcus could access it, he might be able to contact human forces and warn them about the planned invasion. But first, he had to deal with the communication center's security. 2 guards stood outside the main entrance, and the chamber itself was sealed behind quantum locks. Direct assault was impossible, so Marcus would need another approach. He made his way to a maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the communication center. The shaft was barely large enough for a human, which worked to his advantage. Most hegemony personnel were too large to follow him if discovered. The shaft led to a service panel inside the communication center. Marcus carefully opened the panel and peered into the chamber. 3 technicians were on duty, monitoring various communication channels and maintaining the equipment. Marcus waited for an hour, studying their routines and looking for an opportunity. Finally, 2 of the technicians left for a meal break, leaving only one on duty. This was his chance. Moving as quietly as possible, Marcus dropped from the service panel into the communication center. The remaining technician was focused on his displays and didn't notice the intrusion. Marcus crept up behind him and applied a sleeper hold he had learned in military training. The technician collapsed unconscious within seconds. Now Marcus faced the communication equipment itself. The controls were designed for hegemony physiology, but he had studied similar systems during his work on the ship. With careful manipulation, he was able to activate a long-range transmitter and aim it toward human space. But what message could he send? He had no way of knowing if anyone was listening, and the transmission might be detected by hegemony forces. Marcus decided to keep it simple but urgent. "This is Captain Marcus Chen, Colonial Defense Force, calling any human forces. The hegemony is planning massive invasion of human space. Primary target Proxima Centauri, but attack delayed. They have fleet of over 200 ships, including Super Dreadnought Domination. Will attempt to send more intelligence. Chen out." He transmitted the message 3 times, hoping someone would receive it, then carefully shut down the equipment and returned to the service shaft. Getting back to his quarters undetected was even more challenging than the initial infiltration, but Marcus managed to slip past the patrols and return to his bed. The next morning brought chaos to the ship. The unconscious communication technician had been discovered, and Admiral Keth was furious about the security breach. A full investigation was launched, with security teams searching every inch of the ship. Marcus and his team were questioned again, but their quarters had been under surveillance and their presence accounted for during the night period. Without evidence linking them to the communication center breach, the investigators had to look elsewhere. But Marcus knew his time was running out. The hegemony technicians were getting closer to finding his navigation sabotage, and the communication breach would increase scrutiny on everyone. If he was going to attempt his most ambitious plan, taking control of the ship itself, it had to be soon. That afternoon, while working on routine maintenance assignments, Marcus quietly contacted key members of his growing network among the prisoners and lower-ranking crew. Word spread carefully through hidden channels. Tonight would be their only chance. As the Domination drifted in empty space, its crew focused on repairs and investigations. None of them suspected that a small group of determined humans was about to attempt the impossible. They were going to seize control of the most powerful warship in the galaxy and turn it against its builders. Marcus looked out at the alien stars surrounding them and thought about Earth, about the human colonies scattered across dozens of worlds, about the children who deserve to grow up free. Whatever happened next, humanity would know the hegemony was coming, and they would be ready to fight back.